This recording is for Primary Math 3. We're doing the class recording for week 3 to give you an idea of what all is coming as you assign the third week of assignments to your student. This week the assignments come out of all 3 books. The workbook, we're doing exercises 10 to 13 and review exercise 1. Intensive practice, just a few pages in there, and now we're finally starting the word problems book. So let's just kind of talk through some of the information that you'll see. Last week in intensive practice, the mental math aspect took a big jump, and I added an extra recording actually in there for the intensive practice book to make sure that that was something you could use. But number 10, now we have in this book, we have more and more mental math done in exercise 10 and following. And again, just to help us see what to do, let's talk about a couple of those. So the second problem actually across the row there is 6,547, and we're going to subtract 29 from that. Now, to do that mentally, rather than thinking of borrowing and carrying and all that kind of thing, help your student realize that if you have 6,547 somethings and somebody takes away 30 but gives you 1 back, that's the same thing as taking 29 away. And it's much easier to take away 30 and give 1 back than it is to see what happens when you take away 29. So if I take away 3 tens, I have 6,501 10, and my 7 ones becomes an 8 1, 6,518. Much easier than taking away 29 mentally, or even by the division. I'm sorry, by the borrowing and carrying and all that kind of stuff. Another thing, this is small, but on my when my children did these problems, I always asked them to do all of the work at the top of the page before they filled in the box at the bottom, because if you're smart enough and think about it, you can get to the last couple of problems and not have to do them because you know what they're going to end up being, because the answers at the bottom of the page tell you what they're supposed to be. So let's not give them that ability to work that way. Another one of the problems on that page is 4,146 subtract 833. And one of the skills that is helpful is to think about this as the hundreds and the ones, really. If you look at this problem and say, okay, 41 hundreds minus 8, okay, if I have 41 minus 8, that's the same thing as 40 take away 7, that's the same thing as 33. Or maybe you do 41 take away 10, put 2 back, and that gives you 31 plus 2, which is also 33. Either way, when I'm solving this, I have 33 hundreds and 13 ones. The ones are easy. There's no borrowing going on. But if you just look at a number and you kind of break it down, sometimes you can look at it and say, well, it's easy when it's broken down. When you do it all together, sometimes it feels difficult. I want to do one more off of that page. Again, just to demonstrate, this is the very last one on that page, very bottom right corner. Sometimes you can look at a number and realize that the ones in the thousands digits are fine. I just need to do the 75 minus the 49, because I can do 2,000 minus 1,000 and 2 minus 2, and I know that 49 will come out of 75, but that's where I'd have to borrow and carry. So mentally, again, I'm not necessarily writing this down, but I have 75. I'm going to take away 50 and put 1 back. And 25 plus 1 is 26. And so sometimes these problems, if we can take a deep breath and step back a little bit, it's easier to do than we make it look. And you can do these problems mentally and not be taxed by it, especially when we grow those mental muscles a little bit. Exercise 11, same kind of thing. It's also subtraction. It's the same types of steps that we did on the last one. but these are harder problems, so let's just talk about some of how those look. For example, 9,474, this is the very first one on the page, subtract 86. Okay, I don't have enough here to subtract 86. So mentally, I'm going to take the 9400s and take 86 out of that. I'll have 9,374, and that 100 take away 86 leaves me with 14. I know that because, again, when you're subtracting numbers from 100, I need to have the number that makes the numbers a 9 and the ones digit a 10. Okay, because 6 and 4 is 10, and then 8 and 1 is 9, but I'm going to add 1 to get 10. It's going to continue carrying down the row. All the numbers are going to be 9, except for the ones digit will be a 10. So 9,374, add 14, that's easy to do mentally. 9,388. Again, how much they can keep in their head will depend on how long they've practiced. It doesn't hurt even this way. You could, even if you don't keep it in your head, if you write the answers down, you can change this from a subtraction problem to an addition problem. Addition is just categorically easier to handle than subtraction. And sometimes even if you write all of that down, maybe not this part you've done in your head, but you think, you know, the 9,474 subtract 86 is the same thing as 9,374 add 14. So those kinds of skills are certainly possible. On the right side in the middle column is 2,412, subtract 1,283. I think I'd do that much in the same way. 2,400 minus 1,200, but the 83 is too big to subtract from the 12. So 2,400 minus 1,200 is 1,200, but I'm going to use another one of those hundreds to take away the 83. So that gives me 1,100. I still have the 12 from here, and I have 17. When I took 100 minus 83, it left me with 17. So 1,129 would be the answer to that. And it's really pretty simple, and I feel very solid about the answer. I think you do less math doing it this way than if you, alternatively, of course, borrow, carry, subtract, borrow, carry, subtract, borrow, carry. No, didn't need to borrow that one. See? 3 minus 2 is 1, and then 2 minus 1 is 1. So if you do it right, you get the right answer. Anyway, I've done it for a long time now with all my kids, so I don't know how easy it is or how close it is and obvious it is for you to see, but that's what you're going for. Even if they write down some of the steps, thinking about it that way is good. Let's look at the last problem on that page. 6,538 minus 2,809. Again, mentally, I'm looking at my hundreds and my ones. In this case, I can subtract the ones. 38 take away 9. It's the same thing as 38 take away 10, put 1 back. So that's going to be 29. 65 hundreds take away 28 hundreds is the same thing as 65 take away 30, put 2 back. That's 37. And I have the answer with 2 quick mental solutions. Exercise 12 has another cross number puzzle for them. So it continues to show up. They continue giving us the opportunity to try it. And again, maybe exercise 12, the cross number puzzle, maybe instead of doing exercise 12 on one day, maybe you ask your student to do 3 of those every day. just one day do A, C, and D, one day do F, I, J, one day do 3 of the downs, and then 3 more of the downs. And so maybe each day you do exercise 10 and 3 problems over here, and exercise 11 and 3 problems over here, and work it that way so it's not quite so overwhelming. It allows them to continue being engaged in the mental math, right? Too much mental math at once makes their muscles so tired they just can't even hardly function. Or maybe it's just do 3 problems and do your English, and do 3 problems and do your science, and coming back and forth all in one day, but not necessarily asking them to sit and do the whole thing in one sitting. I was noticing, I made a note that there's another skill we haven't talked about as much. On the across side, 9,101 subtract 2,759. If I bring each one of these down by 101, then I can get 9,000 minus 2,658. And having it down to a 1,000 is a great skill. Again, think about it. If I have in this box 9,101 somethings, and maybe this is the 9,000 part, and this is the 101 part, and if I'm supposed to take away 2,759, if I take away the 101 from here, then I only have to subtract the 2,658 from here. That's why it works that I can take both numbers down by 101. And then we had that lovely skill I was telling you about. I want to make to go to 1,000, right? I want to make every number be a 9, except the last one's digit number. I want to, I'm going backwards, I'm going to add it up. I want them to add up to be a 9, except for the last one's going to be a 10. So 8 needs 2 to be 10, 5 needs 4, 6 needs 3. That's going to carry 1 and make this a 3, so I need 6,000 to get to the 9. Okay, now that may be a little oddly stated. Let me try it again this way. I have 9,000 minus 2,000 minus 658. Maybe that's a better way to say it. So if you think of it as 7,000 minus 658, when I take away 658, I'm in the 6,000 range. 6,000, I need 3 hundreds and 4 hundreds and 4 tens and 2 ones, because when I add these together, right, to undo the subtraction, to go back to the addition, if I did this, I'll get a 10 and carry 1 for each one, and I'll end up with 7,000. Okay, so taking numbers down by some value that's easy to do so that you can have an even 1,000 to subtract from is especially nice. Just to make sure I said it well, let me look at letter I across. This is on the across side also. It's the same idea. 5,102 minus 897. Again, you could subtract 900, put 3 back. That might be the better way to do this one. But we can take it down to 5,000. And if I subtract 102 from this one, I have 795. To go from 795 up to 1,000, I need to add 205. That gets me to 1,000. To get to 5,000, I have to have 4,205. Alternate way. 5,102 minus 897. If I think of 51 hundreds minus 9 hundreds, that gives me 42 hundreds. So if I have 42 hundreds and I put 3 back, take away 900, put 3 back, then I have 4,205. These two plus those other 3 that I've got to put back gives me 4,205. Not one right way to do it, just trying real hard to think about it mentally. What's the way to solve it that makes it a mental math problem? When we get into exercise 13, there are word problems. All of the word problems in the intensive practice book and in the challenging word problems book are on the recordings. I did not, so far at least, put the word problems in this book on the recordings. Generally speaking, they're easier, not as necessary to write up for you, but I thought, especially since we're early in the class, I wanted to go through and just talk about a few things, what all is on there, what all needs to be on there to make this an easy problem to solve, and just how to show it. Okay, so number 4 tells us that Debbie saved $1,435. Maylin saved $298 more than Debbie. Now, keep in mind, I have no idea. Well, I do actually, since this is 1,435, and I can draw Maylin's as 1,435. And I know that Alice saved 325 less than Maylin. So what I don't know, there's Maylin, and 325 less is going to be past that, down in this range. I don't know how much is in the first part of that, but that's the question, is how much did Alice save? Now, when you look at this graph and look at this picture, certainly you could add these two together and subtract 325. You could certainly solve the problem by saying 1,435, add 298, subtract 325. And in a sense, that's the only way to solve it. We're going to do that. We're going to try and see if there's a way to do that mentally that makes sense. And the way I think that makes sense with this, really, see if I can make it a good drawing here, is this picture, the part that I'm missing right here is 27, because this is 298 and I need 27 more to get to 325. Over here we could say, you know, if somebody gives you 298 and takes away 325, it's just as if they came and just did it in one step and took away 27. The net loss is 27. And so instead of doing it, you know, the smaller you can keep the numbers, the more accurate you're going to be. And so instead of making it go bigger and then get smaller, you could just keep it small. When you subtract 27, you get 1,408. And that would be the answer. That's the amount that Alice saved. Number 6, on the same set, we know that the total cost of an oven and a refrigerator is $2,030, and we know that the refrigerator, we know the oven costs $695. Total cost of both is $2,030. Notice the question this problem asks is to find the difference in the cost between the refrigerator and the oven. I think it's very interesting, especially on the Singapore math word problems, to realize what we're being asked, because sometimes when we know what we're being asked, we can solve it faster than if you find all of the answers, right? We could say how much is the refrigerator and then find the amount less, but we don't really even have to do that. Here's the key thing. I know that this part of the refrigerator, the even part to the oven, is $695. The part I'm looking for is the difference between the two, how much more the refrigerator cost. It is a fact that it is much easier for us to double numbers than a lot of other math. And when I look at this mentally, I would double 700, and then I would take away the 10 extra that I added. So 1,390 is that answer. So these two parts of my picture add up to 1,390. The rest of the picture is all the way up to the 2,030. So how do I get to 2,030 from there? Well, when I look at that, I would take 1,300 or 1,390. I would take it up to 2,000 by adding 610, and then I need another 30 to get to 2,030. So a total of $640 is how far I have left in this one. That's the difference between the two numbers. Again, 1,390. If I add 610, then I'm up to 2,000. And I need to add 30 more to get up to 2,030. Now, nothing wrong with doing it the old-fashioned way. Your student can take 2,030, they can subtract 695, and that would give them the cost of the refrigerator, which would be $1,335. And then they could say, well, how much more is that than $695, and do a subtraction problem to come up with $640. And that's a very traditional, normal, fine way to do it. As much as possible, we want to help our students to use a graph, a picture, do it mentally, think creatively, find more than one way to solve the problem, and go from there. The review section is the next part that's assigned in the workbook. And for the review, it is exactly that. It is meant to see what skills you know, what skills you don't know. It goes back over and covers the material we've done up to this point. So far, we've just been working on place value and addition subtraction. After this, we're going to start jumping into multiplication division. So this just kind of makes sure we're all the way ready with it. It's deceptive because it's only 11 problems. There's a lot of ABCs on there. So just make sure you allow enough time for the reviews. A lot of times that's all my kids do in one day is do the rest of the material before, and then the review is an assignment all by itself. In the intensive practice book, if you're staying caught up, I kick over to in this week, we go all the way to the back and do some challenging word problems, they call it. I want to challenge you not to be challenged by the word challenging. I will tell you that these are really good thinking skills problem. And I will tell you that I see very many SAT skills in these kind of problems. And I don't say that to say that your child needs to learn SAT test prep. And I don't say that to say that that's the end-all be-all is to get ready for the SAT test. I just say that to tell you that somebody thinks that these thinking skills help you with college readiness, and I want you to know that your child is learning the thinking skills behind the word problems when they do the Singapore math, especially these challenging problems. I will tell you, number 4, as far as I have been able to tell, is hard. It took me quite a bit of time to do it. Maybe one of you will someday write me and say, my child did this in 3 minutes and here's how, and I would love to hear it. But I would tell you that you could, it is on the recording. You could tell your child, I had this conversation with my children many times, I don't expect you to be able to do this by yourself, but I want you to understand the process when I'm doing it in front of you. And so I would walk them through it and they would say, okay, I understand. And they did. They couldn't have done it by themselves, but it made sense when I explained it to them. So number 4 might be one, you put your child in front of the computer and let me explain it to them, or let me explain it to you and you can go explain it to them. But there's just a lot of things about that make it hard. The rest of the problems are not all that hard. Okay, the rest are interesting. They're good problems. They're problems that your child should think through, and if they can't get them, though, and when you show them, they'll be like, I should have known that. But for whatever reason, number 4, at least for me, it threw me a curveball. So they're all in the recording. I guess we're actually only doing a couple of the pages this week. We're doing 85 to 87 this week. We pick up 88 to 90 after that. And so, so don't skip them. Go for it. They're good thinking skills, but that number 4 is one that is pretty rough. So the rest of the intensive practice problems are great thinking skills, are good to do. Number 4 is the one that I would give you a heads up for. It's just a booger of a problem to do. The challenging word problems. This is the first week that you're doing the challenging word problems, and the one thing that I would ask you to do is that there are worked examples in the beginning of each section of the Challenging Word Problems book. And so when you are working those, please just walk your child through that with them. Sit down side by side, let them look at the problem. You don't have to cover up. Sometimes I felt like I need to with my kids, but you can just have the book open and say, okay, they did this, here's a picture they drew. They have lovely pictures. Everything is nicely laid out, and it's good because it helps them learn some skills. There are times when a problem is really, really hard, and then you look back and say, well, they did one exactly like it. Or I should say the problem feels hard, and then you realize they did an example just exactly like it, and if you follow the same process that the example showed, you'll be in great shape. So do the examples together, and the problems have different levels. They move basically from kind of concrete applications onto more abstract problems, and of course they're divided also into just the word problems, and then each section has a challenging word problems. But don't let the fact that it says challenging word problems confuse you or your child. They are getting more difficult as they go through the section. They do start out easy and get harder, but just because it says challenging, what my children and I found out is that many times one problem, number 7 might be really hard to figure out for you, and number 8 might be simple. So don't assume that because you got stuck on one that the rest of this section is going to be hard. Ask them to give each problem a really good solid attempt, and they'll be able to go with it from there. So that's really all of the material that you'll encounter in the 3rd week, and we'll talk more for next week.